Hello and welcome back to Bookish, and welcome back to the first in my videos in my short story series. The first short story I read as part of my series was Death in the Woods by Sherwood, which is the lead story in this collection of his short stories, published sometime around 1933. Sherwood was one of those authors who was a part of the kind of the golden age, I guess, of American literature in the early part of the 20th century. Anderson, Wharton, Hemingway, Faulkner, Fitzgerald, Woolf, Willa Cather, all kind of published around this exact same time period. Sherwood led an interesting and somewhat tragic life in which his parents died when he was young and he was kind of on his own. He served in the Spanish-American War in Cuba for a while, took on various jobs, and he wrote novels and stories for a while, but until his collection of interrelated short stories called Winesburg, Ohio was published, he didn't really get a lot of attention, but that work was really kind of hailed as a masterpiece and kind of launched Anderson into a career as a writer. He was influential. He influenced Hemingway and was one of kind of Hemingway's mentors for a brief period of time, and he knew everybody within the American literary world. So about this story, about Death in the Woods, on the surface, Death in the Woods is a pretty straightforward, tragic story about an incredibly poor woman living in a rural community somewhere in the north, somewhere where it gets incredibly cold. And a lot of the sections of the story do nothing more than simply outline kind of the nightmare that her life was. Not wanted, almost kind of like enslaved kind of situation for a while, freed from that only to then be married by an abusive, alcoholic, gambling thief, gave birth to children. Her son, not any better than the husband, daughter died as a baby, often abandoned, living kind of on the outskirts of this small town, where she struggles just to make ends meet, to feed herself, to feed her family, to feed the dogs that they have. And one day she goes into town to try to buy what food she can and beg for more to feed the dogs. And she is on her way back in a snowy field covered in deep snow and incredibly cold temperatures. She essentially freezes to death, after which the dogs that she normally feeds essentially attack her dead body to get the food that she has, and leaves her bare and exposed out there in the snow, until eventually she's found. The story is narrated by a young boy, the youngest of two brothers, who we have to assume is the stand-in for Anderson, and so we get kind of the limited perspective and the boyish perspective of this woman in some places, but then kind of the wiser, older, adult Anderson in others. And then, just as you're kind of getting near the end of the story, Anderson throws in what is a fairly, modern twist to the story. And so I'm going to read you the line where essentially the story changes. Anderson writes, "The scene in the forest had become for me, without my knowing it, the foundation for the real story I am now trying to tell. The fragments you see had to be picked up slowly long afterwards." So all of a sudden, with that line and with what follows it, you see that the story is about how Anderson wrote the story and why he wrote the story. And then in that last section, you see that Anderson revealing where he got the details about the poor woman's house, about the dogs, about the situation she was in before she married the man who kind of makes her life sort of, a nightmare. And it becomes almost, I think, kind of meta in the sense that you feel the presence of the writer. And he says, I had to learn and add all these details so I knew what the story was really about, which is, about loneliness and tragedy and the ability of a human being in even a small community to pass unnoticed, to tragically go without anyone paying any attention to her, anyone offering her any real kindness, and then to die tragically. And I just think it's an incredible story, both for its writing, its construction, for that kind of really fairly dazzling bit of modernity there, where Anderson actually talks about the process of writing a story, and how an author picks up details. That the story wasn't just that this woman died in the snow and that people found her, but the story was more than that, and accumulated and built in his mind through the acquisition of details and specific events. Anyway, I hope if you read Death in the Woods that you enjoyed it. Really be looking forward to your comments. If you did read it, or if you didn't read it, I'll leave the link again to the PDF down below. You can read it online for free. It's long out of copyright. Love to hear your thoughts, and as always, thank you for watching.